Hello everyone, I'm glad to have you back. In our last lesson we looked at list slicing, and previously we looked at lists as well, and we found out how we could use lists and then use the index to find the position of items in a list. We also looked at a few list methods. We added items or elements to a list by appending them. This time around, let's go and look at another data type in Python called the tuple, which is quite similar to a list but different. And in case you don't know what lists are and how you can slice content within a list, please click the video link to check out the lessons on lists. Alright, so a tuple in Python is remember we said we can mutate lists. Well, with tuples, we can't really mutate them directly. Now, so why would we want to choose a list over a tuple? Well, there are several reasons. For instance, if you're working on, if you want to have real data security, you don't want anyone overriding what you've already created. So basically, you'd have a tuple and you use that tuple to create your content. So basically, that's why you can use tuples. But if you want to run an efficient program, you might want to use lists because you could change things, you could reorder them, and you could sort them and all that. So that's just the simple difference because of security and efficiency. So alright, so all that is talk. Let's just go ahead and begin creating tuples. So I'll go over here, I'll do Control N, and I'll just save that in our code folder, and let's just call this tuple example.py, and we'll just save that so we have our tuples example right here. And I think I should have called it tuple example let's say 10, because we have our lists as 9. So we'll just do 10 underscore tuple example. Right, so I kind of like that, and let's just drag this and place it over here. Yes, we want to move this so it to be in this folder. So let's close this, let's save, and let's close this window right here. So tuples by definition are ordered and unchanged, so we cannot mutate them. So let's create an example here. So let's put a title, and let me make that a bit bigger. I just say working with tuples. So let's create an example. So I'll create a tuple called numbers, and I'll assign some values in it. Now when you want to create a tuple, you'll use parentheses. Lists use squares, right? Tuples use parentheses, and some people call it tuple. I call it tuples. It doesn't really matter. So I'll just type in a few numbers and I'll add a string here. So tuples can also take multiple data type. So if we actually print the type of numbers, like so, I'll save that and run it. We should actually see a class tuple. So I'll go CLS, clear the screen. So let's run that, and we can see it's a class tuple. That's super great. So we can even use Python's default iterable methods like the count method to count items. So let's create a variable called counting items, and within that variable let's do numbers dot count, like so. And let's actually print out the count elements. So let's say for the first one, let's say 23, like so, and let's run this. Alright, so I'm not actually printing it, so I'll just do a print counting items, like so. I'll save that and let's run this. So we actually see we have 1 right here. So basically what I'm doing is I'm asking Python how many times the number 23 in this tuple called numbers, and then it's telling me 1. So to make this to make this print method super readable, what I want to do is to just add this like so. I'm using an F string. Again, if you want to understand how to format your text output using the print statement, please check out these lessons using F strings. So I go in detail and explain that. So it's actually a good watch, so you understand why this is here. So I'll just see the number of times 23 occurs in the tuple, and then I can even pass in the tuple, it's called numbers, like so, is, and we can actually see the results of that. So a quick explanation, if we're using an F string, it's a modern Python way of displaying your string output, and if we use an F string, it can pass in the value of this variable in here. So we should expect to see this entire tuple and then the results of this tuple. It just makes your results much more readable and you can actually see it. So it says here, the number of times 23 occurs in the tuple 235 and high is 1. I'll just add a little space here so we can actually have a space in between. So I'm just adding one white space in between, and if I run that again, we can actually see this is the old results and this is the new results. We can actually see there's a little space between, which makes this much more readable. So that's using the Python built-in count method on iterables. So how do we access items? So I'll say accessing items, or accessing tuples, items in tuples, like so. We can do we can use the indexing to access items. So if I say numbers and let's say the third element, yep, I said third element, and I'm typing 4 in between the square brackets because it's 0 indexed. So this is element 0, 1, 2, 3, right? But there are 4, so the fourth element is going to be this. So let's just print that and see. So if I run this, it says hi. So let's clear our screen. Also, we can count backwards, which is called negative indexing. So we can do negative indexing just as we can do with lists. We can also do that with tuples. So I'll just type in numbers and I'll start with -1. This is going to be counting backwards from the list. So if we save this and run it, we should actually see it says hi because the fourth element is actually the last one. So if I do this, so let me do -2, and this should return 44. Basically, I'm starting, this is -1, and the next one is going to be -2. So we should see 44 if we run this script, and like that, we actually see we have 44 right here, which means this is good and it's running super fine. We can also do ranged indexing. So I'll just say ranged indexing, and let's just print the numbers from range 1, 2, 3, like so. And if we run that, we should actually get 5 and 3 for that tuple. So again, from range 1, this is 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. So it's going to exclude the last element, and so we can only have we can actually see our results, which is a 5 and 33. Right. So we can even check if an element exists in a tuple. For instance, if I want to find out if there's the greeting hi in our tuple, we can actually do that using an if statement with some Python code. Let's just quickly see how we can do that. So I'm just going to say checking items in a list. So I'm just going to say if high in numbers. I'll press the enter key. I'm just going to say print. Let's just say yes or yup. And I'll use a double quote because I don't want to have errors, because Python would raise errors if you use single quotes. So I'll just say yup, and I'll say hi is in the numbers tuple. So if we save that and run it, it says yup, hi is in the numbers tuple, because we actually have hi in this tuple right here. Alright, that's super great. Let's move on. We can also get the length of a list item. Let's just see how we can do that. So I'll just go here and say getting the length of items, length of a tuple rather. So what we can do is to let's create a variable to store the result of the length. So let's say length of numbers is going to be equal to len, and within the len method we'll pass in the tuple. So the tuple is numbers, like so. So here we can just simply print length of numbers, and to make this readable, I'll just use an f string, like so. I'll say the length, how do I put it? Oh, let's do it like this. Let's say there are, and then we'll pass in the length of numbers. So this is going to be like say it's going to say there are 2 elements or there are 3 items, like that. So it's going to say there are, it's going to pick the number and return it and place it in that curly brace, and I'll just say items in this tuple. So it's going to say there are so items, number of items in this tuple. Let's run it. And it says there are 5 items in this tuple. So because it's actually going to count the items and return it for us, we don't need to do any manual counting. Now here's a peculiar case. So I'll just say strange case. So let's create a tuple with only one single item. So if I say Unity 3D, or let me just say I am alone, right? So if I say I'm alone, and then I'll just type in a text and say home alone, a string rather, not a text. So I actually have a I'm trying to create a tuple with one item, and I'm calling that string home alone. So let's go ahead and print the type of I am alone. What kind of data is I am alone? Because I said we create tuples by using parentheses. So if I say print and I say type I am alone, so let's run that. So it says it's a class string. It's saying I am alone as a string, not as a tuple. Well, it turns out if you want a single element to be a tuple, you have to use comma, like so. So if I place a comma right here and save this, and I press Ctrl F5 to run this, it actually tells us this is a class tuple. So who knew we just had to put a comma here? And I've heard someone, a friend tell me that he went for an interview and they asked him this and he didn't know it, and I was like, wow, that's funny because I didn't know it as well. So I just learned from him, and maybe if I go to an interview, I'm going to get it. All the best, man. So let's move on. So I actually said in the beginning that tuples, you can't change tuples, right? Because they are unmutable, we can't change them. And you know how these things work sometimes. When you're younger, most likely they told you 1 minus 5 is impossible, right? Just 5 minus 1 would be 4, but 1 minus 5 is impossible. And then when you go to a certain stage, you actually learn that 1 minus 5 is minus 4. So, and that was like really mind blowing. So we could actually have a walk around. There's a way you can actually change the content of a tuple, mutate the tuple, and then convert it back. So it's a very simple trick. All you need to do is to convert the tuple to lists using a Python built-in method called lists, and then we're going to change the list back to a tuple. Let's see an example. So here, let's say let's create a variable to store our converted tuple. So let's say numbers as lists is going to be equal to, and we'll use the keyword list and then pass in the name of that tuple. So here I've created a variable called numbers as lists, and I'm casting our tuple into a list. So basically this is going to convert our tuple numbers into a list. And next I'm going to append something in our list. So let's say numbers as lists dot append, and I'm just going to append a string. I'll just say y2k. Remember Y2K, there was a buzz in the year 2000 where we were told all computers are going to stop working, because of memory and all that, and that happened. So yeah, so you can actually Google Y2K and find out about it. So here, let's print our lists. So let's say numbers as lists, just to see the content of our lists. So I'll control F5, and now we can see the items in this, and it's a list because we can see the square brackets. So, and this is the item we appended to that list called Y2K. And now let's do the magic. So now let's reconvert to a tuple, and here let's here we converted to list. So we actually flipped it to convert it, and I'm going to convert it back using the initial name. So I'm just going to say numbers is going to be equal to, and we'll use the Python keyword tuple, which is a built-in sequence, and then we'll actually pass in the let's say numbers as lists now. Yeah, so let's print numbers, and let's also print the type of numbers, like so. So if we save this and run, and let's just make this quite bigger. So we actually see we have a list here, and now we have a tuple. We know that this is a list because it's stored in a square bracket. We know this is a tuple because it's stored as a, the output comes out like a parentheses. And then it's telling us it's a tuple again because we printed the type, and it's telling us it's of class tuple. So that's how you can play around with tuples. Again, at the beginning, I explained that you might want to, let's say you're storing student scores on their final exams. Those kind of things are not mutable. Or let's say, someone's first name, you can store that in a database as the name that person gave you. So you can actually use tuples for those kind of things. You can use tuples for things like serial numbers or primary keys in databases where those things won't change. You can actually use tuples because they are much more secure. Basically, someone can't come at the back end and easily change these things because they are actually tuples. But if it's a list, it'll be much more efficient because someone could say, hey, you actually spelled my first name wrong. So I could just, append stuff and change the name, change that person's name where there's the error. So that's the difference. So it depends on how you want to do it. Strictly speaking, if you're working for cybersecurity, you might want to look at tuples or specialized number types. But if you're just working day to day, you can actually play around with your lists. They are quite efficient as well. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next lesson.